Chapter 27, Anchors Down. I thought I heard the captain say, "Leave her, Johnny, leave her. You may go ashore and touch your pay. It's time for us to leave her." Pumping and Halyard Shanty. Meekly her great wings folded, the Queen of Asia gave herself into captivity again. A creature without will, she followed at the end of a steel cable while the Alatak led the way slowly through the dangerous shoals outside the river's mouth. Along the huge bark's deck lounged most of the China gang, laughing and joking as though they had not a care in the world. Half a dozen boisterously merry crap games were in progress, while from the top of a lifeboat a colored quartet sang popular songs. Several of the crew applauded the singers. Others watched the crap games, offering the players humorous advice. A few even tossed coins on the deck and joined the games. Bert Lindsay, ordinary seaman, stood by the starboard bulwarks just abaft the mizzen shrouds, watching the slow approach of the brown, low-lying shore. Beside him stood a big Negro and a small white boy. Big Boy didn't dare come on deck, the boy was saying enthusiastically, 'cause the crew would have bumped him off for one of the gang, so he stayed in the 'tween decks and kept 5 crazy colored men from joining the fight. Cornered 'em, he did, waved a razor in front of their faces, and they didn't dare move. Big Boy grinned cheerfully. "They knows I's an artist with that tonsorial instrument," he said. And Lino, the Mexican boss, he had 4 Mexicans in another corner, Bill Billings went on. They didn't do any fighting either. But Big Boy, he had 5. Bert praised his 2 friends for the parts they had played, with one ear cocked all the while in the direction of the poop. Why didn't the man at the wheel strike the bell? Seaman number 28 looked at his watch. 3 minutes to 9. "Come to the chart house at 9, Hargrave had said. The 3 minutes dragged by. "Bing, bing," said the bell, as Bert excused himself and walked quickly aft. The lookout's bell sounded its answer. "Bong, bong." Hargrave greeted him with a smile and a firm handshake. "Captain Hagestrom has very kindly turned the chart room over to us, Bert," he said, "so we can talk it out. Now, tell me the whole story." Bert took a deep breath, spent a moment in sorting out his thoughts, and began. For an hour, Hargrave regarded the ash on the end of his cigar with thoughtful eyes, interrupting only to ask an occasional question. Bert told of the first threats of mutiny and of the storm which prevented its outbreak, of the shredded sails and the deck load adrift which all but wrecked the vessel. He told how the seamen, with good cause, had cursed the stringent economy which allowed a vessel to be sent to sea with inadequate gear and rotten sails. He told of the call at Honolulu, of the heavy box which contained scrap iron and 6 rifles, all that the captain could buy, and of the cut sails. He described the battle which had finally taken place and the heroism of officers and men. He told of his contacts with Pete Condon, all except the incident in which he had tackled the pock-marked man and thrown him against the steel wall of the chart house, how Fong Tuck had knifed the seaman, and of the confession that death had cut short. He told of the friends he had made among the crew, and did not neglect Big Boy Johnson, Bill Billings, and the parts they had played. He told of the circumstantial evidence against Poker Gus and the doctor, and the little he knew about the unknown Q. At last he finished the tale, and for several minutes Hargrave puffed in silence. "You followed instructions even better than I had hoped, Bert," he said at length, and smiled. Bert looked his question. "You used your eyes and ears, and then used your head to weigh what you saw and heard." The boy flushed with praise, remembering that Fong Tuck had once told him something very different about his eyes and ears. He told Hargrave of the incident. Hargrave laughed. "I never thought of it at the time," he said, "but of course the old heathen was taking everything in the night you were at my apartment. Evidently he kept well posted for the next few days, too. Just before the Queen of Asia sailed, he came to me and announced that he was going on a vacation for 4 or 5 months. I had a hunch that he intended shipping on the bark. I accused him of it, and he admitted it, said he was going to make the China boys be good and look after you, since you were a friend of mine." "Awfully decent of him," Bert grinned. "But you know," Hargrave went on, "I have just developed a queer feeling that he had another motive. I believe that he had learned through some mysterious Chinatown channels that Pete Condon was the man who had brought the high explosive ship model. and that Condon was to be in the bark's crew. Then you think he came along, expressly to perform the execution? Hargrave nodded. But to get back to our own affairs, Hargrave said, it may interest you to know that Captain Hagestrom's wireless reports, plus the knowledge that you were on board, have caused your father to completely change his stand on the subject of economy. He has acquired the sailor's point of view, and he appreciates the fact that men's lives are at stake when a vessel is sent out improperly outfitted for the sea. When you get home next fall, tell your father the story you have just told me, and he will be even more certain that he was right to change. Bert struggled to keep back tears of joy. When he could control his voice, he asked, "Why did you come north, Mr. Hargrave?" "For several reasons," the general manager answered, "but chiefly because I investigated address 14 Spofford Alley with a squad of police detectives." "You found?" "The underworld headquarters of an official of the Bristol Bay and Chignik Fisheries Corporation." Bert caught his breath. "And that official was?" "J. Roscoe Zwissig," Hargrave smiled. "Also known as Q," breathed the boy. "Known to his underlings as Q," nodded Hargrave. "His company, as you know, wanted to buy out the Nushagak Salmon Company, and they had commissioned Zwissig to force the sale. Evidently, they preferred to know nothing of the methods he used, and they may or may not have known that he had a private reason for wishing our company no good." "A private reason?" Bert remembered Beth's story of Zwissig's unwelcome attentions to their sister, Mary. "Yes. You see, 3 years ago, Zwissig had a rather important position with the Nushagak Salmon Company. Then your father and I discovered that he was making certain changes in some of the company's books, which diverted a fairly large amount of the company's profits into the pockets of J.R. Zwissig. Instead of prosecuting the man, as we no doubt should have done, we allowed him to resign after making good as much of the loss as he could. The human mind is a queer thing, Bert, as you are finding out. Sometimes a kindness evokes bitterness and hatred instead of gratitude. That's the way it worked this time. Zwissig had done his best to send the Nushagak Salmon Company to bankruptcy, and knowing how much depended on the season's pack, he concentrated his efforts on attempting to prevent the Queen of Asia from getting to the cannery. "But Captain Tom got her here," Bert gloated. "Yes, Captain Tom and a loyal crew," smiled Hargrave. "Zwissig," he added after a moment, "should be on his way to San Quentin prison by now." "Maybe Q stands for Quentin," Bert thought. Aloud, he asked, "And what about Poker Gust? Is there any evidence against him?" "None whatever," Hargrave answered. "In his case, I think that you are mistaken. He has sailed with our ships for years, and Captain Hagstrom has perfect confidence in him. He has a sentimental weakness for poker, which makes him ignore social distinctions more than is desirable in the mate of a ship, but otherwise we have nothing against him." "And his friendship with the doctor?" Bert queried. "Not a friendship at all," answered Hargrave. "Gust was gathering evidence on his own hook, and he got enough to put the man behind the bars even if—" He paused and drew a paper from an inside pocket. "Even if I didn't have a warrant for the arrest of Richard Kirk, alias Dr. Hyes, alias 2 or 3 other things, who has already served 2 terms in the penitentiary. He's wanted by both the San Francisco police and Uncle Sam." "Then he isn't a doctor?" "No more than I am, though he was a male nurse for a time and knows entirely too much about narcotics. His medical certificate is forged, which is just one of the reasons why he's going back with me in the Star in irons." Hargrave took another paper from his pocket and tore it slowly across 2 or 3 times. "This," he said, "is a warrant for the arrest of Pete Condon. Fong Tuck's idea of just retribution has saved him from a term in prison." For several moments the two were silent. A flood of vivid memories surged across the boy's mind. The pock-marked man lying on the deck, staring at the sky. A thin, grimacing face pressed close to his own as they plunged together into the icy waters under the bowsprit. A bleeding youth bursting into the lazarette. A gruff old man clenching his jaws while a bullet was taken out of his shoulder. He started at a long blast from the Alatak's whistle. A few seconds later, the bark vibrated as an unfamiliar rumble sounded from far forward, the anchor chain roaring through the hawse hole. Hargrave smiled reflectively, a little sadly, Bert thought. "That's the port bower anchor," he said. "Your voyage is over, Bert. 49 days from San Francisco." Together, the square-shouldered ex-skipper with gray temples and the youth, who was seaman number 28, walked out to the poop rail, where they stood side by side, gazing at the broad expanse of the tide waters of the Nushagak. Far away to the north and west, beyond miles of low, rolling tundra, rose a seemingly endless line of jagged, snow-covered peaks, cold, bleak, beautiful. 3/4 of a mile to eastward, nestled on a little plain in front of sheer 100-foot cliffs, were the 10 or a dozen red, sprawling buildings that comprised the Nushagak Salmon Company's Nushagak River Cannery. Again came the rumbling roar from forward. "The starboard bower," murmured Hargrave. "She's moored for the season. Do you still want to be a fisherman, Bert?" he asked after a little. "If it's half as much fun as being a sailor," the boy answered, "I wouldn't miss it for worlds. I feel like a seaman and fisherman now, and think like one, and look like one." Hargrave smiled. They shook hands again before Bert returned to the main deck to join his fellow seamen and fishermen. As he started down the steps, 2 tiny, fluffy yellow birds flitted past his head, bound for the shore. The warblers, too, had finished their voyage. Fini.